Hello everybody and welcome to Inclusion and the Role of the Governor Part 2. So for just as a quick sound check, if you can hear me, could you raise your hand? Okay, great. That shows that most of you can hear me, which is brilliant. So hope you are all doing well on this Tuesday lunchtime. So if you didn't catch the previous webinar, which we did 2 weeks ago, that was the first part of inclusion and the role of the governor. And we focused on recruitment and retention, on parental engagement, and on curriculum. So that is available for you on the Governors for School website. If you just go to webinars, you can watch that freely available now. Okay, so for today, we are going to focus on different parts of the, still looking at inclusion, but this time, so the aims of today are really to briefly reflect on the learnings made from the previous webinar, if you did attend, and then to know how inclusion affects behaviour, so looking at rewards and sanctions, looking at attendance, looking at pupil achievement and language. And hopefully by the end of today's webinar, you'll know practical strategies to improve inclusion as a governor, to go back to your governing boards. So the first thing that I'd like you to do is, if you did attend last week's webinar, or if you managed to have a look at it, did you manage to come up with a short or a long-term goal to help to improve inclusion? So if you could just reflect kind of internally and maybe jot it down if you did come up with them and what they were, and how are you getting on with that? Were you able to bring that back to your governing board? Have you had another meeting? And if so, just sort of reflecting on how that went. If you didn't attend the last webinar, if you could just be thinking about any questions that might come up today. So I'll just give you about 30 seconds there. Okay, excellent. So as a recap, then we're looking at inclusion, and the main thing to be thinking about here about what is inclusion, as you can see from this image, that it's going that step further than just making sure that there is no discrimination, that no pupil faces discrimination, but it is going that step further, and it's thinking, how can we actually celebrate diversity and celebrate the needs of all the different communities that your school looks after and represents. And that's why in these webinars, it says more than just a policy, that it actually involves all areas of school life and all areas of the governor's role as well, that we really look at everything through the lens of inclusion. So again, just to recap, why is it really important for school governors to prioritise inclusion and equalities? So as we mentioned last week, specifically, these are some statistics that are out there, although there's many more that I could have chosen. But it's really, in terms of exclusions, we're seeing that those pupils with special educational needs are 5 times more likely to be excluded than those without special educational needs. Similarly, Black Caribbean pupils are 3 times more likely to be excluded than white British pupils, and Gypsy, Roma and travelling communities have the highest rates of exclusion. And we need to make sure that all our pupils feel that they belong and that they can really thrive in school. But it comes under to lots of things in terms of the curriculum, in terms of behaviour. And then our final point is, and I actually heard from a governor a week ago that they were specifically asked during their Ofsted inspection if what did they have in place in that directly met the Equality Act in 2010. So it is up to us as governors to look at that document and have a look at the Equalities Act of 2010 and to make sure that we've put everything in place that we can to make our pupils feel included and our staff feel included, and as well as our parents. So the first topic that we're going to be looking at today is on behaviour, so looking at rewards and sanctions. And why is this important? Well, it's really important that our pupils know the boundaries that we set them, but also that we have a behaviour policy which is fair and consistent. We want to minimise exclusions, and as a governor we need to put in place things in order to minimise exclusions, but we also want to maximise those rewards and help pupils to achieve. But we do find that there are some difficulties. So, for example, it often can be hard upholding these kind of strict behaviour policies, but also creating enough flexibility to help all pupils, and those specifically with like different needs, for example. And it's also difficult to encourage intrinsic motivation in pupils, and that is that the pupils themselves really want to do well because they want to do well, not because as opposed to extrinsic motivation being that they're going to get a reward, or they're going to get something external that's going to make them participate in a lesson or strive for the top marks. So I will now discuss how we can start to improve this and what strategies there are. So looking at our behaviour policies, and we need to understand as governors, we need to collect and analyse the data on behaviour. So what are the causes of pupils of misbehaving and leading them to face sanctions? And that some of those causes might be out of our control. Within the education system, you know, there's often lots going on at home, but we need to be thinking what possible solutions and creative solutions we can come up with to help change some of those. And that can also be really looking at individual pupils who are constantly kind of facing these sanctions. And then secondly, looking at our behaviour policy. So it needs to be consistent, and that leads into my last point about teacher training. We need to make sure that all of our teachers know what the behaviour policy is and make sure that they follow that consistently. And so often pupils will find it really confusing if, you know, one teacher is saying they can do something and another teacher is saying they can't do that exact same thing. And we need to, you know, as governors, make sure that that message is delivered really clearly through our behaviour policy and through our conversations. But also we need to know that we need to make sure it's fair. So, for example, all our pupils are different and they have different needs. And so there might be a pupil with, for example, ADHD or has trouble concentrating, and they may have things in place that they can use, for example, a fidget or a stress ball that they can use within the lesson that will actively help them to concentrate. And we need to be able to be flexible enough to accommodate for those needs. And actually, that deserves praise, because that pupil is finding ways in order to focus and communicate and concentrate. And that doesn't mean that pupil gets away with things that other pupils couldn't. For example, if they were just obstructing other pupils. But we do need to be flexible enough to accommodate for those needs. And I've also heard another example where a pupil had a green, red, and amber card in front of them, and during the lesson they would change that depending on how they were doing and how they were feeling. If they were feeling really energetic or they were finding it really hard to concentrate, they might put a red, and it just shows to the teacher, without them getting into trouble, it shows to the teacher that they might need a different strategy. But also looking at your borough and how your borough manages behaviour, and really learning from those the other schools in the borough who might have a similar demographic to your school. What is the best practice for managing behaviour? And then looking at specific rules in your behaviour policy. You know, are there any rules that might exclude some pupils? For example, hairstyles. So a school might have a hairstyle that boys can only wear short hair and it can't touch the collar. And what if there was a boy who wanted to wear long hair and wants to have long hair? And what are the are we making that inclusive? If girls can have long hair, what is that? What message are we sending then to the boys and also to the girls? So really looking at those specific rules. Also, for example, a cultural hairstyle of dreadlocks. You know, what's your school policy on that? And really thinking about are all those rules inclusive, and what do teachers do, and what messages are we sending? So another really important point about our behaviour policy is that bullying there's lots of different types of bullying, and obviously we're seeing a rise of cyberbullying, and it's really important that it's very clear in our behaviour policies that what constitutes bullying, and that we have strategies in place to deal with all of the different types of bullying, so that it's really clear to teachers, it's really clear to pupils, and that actually these things are escalated when they should be. So that just shows you all the different types of bullying. And I have a specific case study here, which is from Stonewall. And you can have a look on Stonewall's website. They have lots of resources there in terms of how to make schools really inclusive. And I've just picked one case study. There's multiple on their website, but this school in Newcastle, they developed a staff equality and diversity team, which specifically focused on race, religion, disability, and LGBT issues. And they had this slogan, all different, all equal. So again, they're really going you know, a step ahead of just looking at our behaviour policies, that they're actively celebrating difference. So they had LGBT groups in schools, which met with the school nurse, but they also had this second group which discussed positive body image, stereotyping, labelling, and again, with the linking back to a school culture, all the staff wore rainbow lanyards, and they had this training on what to do hearing homophobic or biphobic or transphobic bullying, and they put these posters up around school, so you can have a look at these two posters. So that brings me on to looking at rewards. Rewards are a really powerful tool in order for us to celebrate our pupils and to you know, people and students will be motivated by rewards, but we need to be thinking about who is being rewarded and what are they being rewarded for, and so trying to think about other ways of rewarding pupils. So, for example, giving pupils responsibility, you know, making them prefects or mentors. So an initiative is having year 10s to mentor your year 7s, is a really excellent way of actually building empathy and and confidence within the year 10s, and similarly building confidence in the year 7s. But you could also do this with pupils, for example, English as an additional language pupils, and having, if a new student comes in from that country, that they have someone to go to and someone familiar. And then talking about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So in terms of extrinsic motivation, there's lots of tools out there, but having Star of the Week, having contacting parents, but also displaying a work of a range of pupils. So there's always some pupils who, because of their poor handwriting, they never get onto the wall, and it's a really it's an amazing thing for pupils to be able to show their parents, oh, I've got my work on the wall. So really thinking about how, you know, for those students where maybe their handwriting isn't so good, or maybe they're not always on the wall or not always celebrated, how can we still celebrate and showcase their work? And then in terms of building that intrinsic motivation, so having celebrating effort, so growth mindset, you know, celebrating the fact that they've really worked hard on a piece of work, or they've changed their mindset from I can't do this, this is really tough, to I can't do this yet. And Carol Dweck does lots of work on growth mindset if you want more information on that. And then finally, looking at on rewards, looking at staff, and actually how are staff being rewarded for their hard work. Obviously, going back to what I was mentioning last time about equal pay and rewarding staff in terms of financial gains, but we know that is also tricky in the current climate. So what other ways are there to really recognise staff for their work? And so I've heard about an initiative of Teacher of the Month or Teacher of the Week award, and that was really to do with having teachers email into an assembly where, and it could be that a teacher stepped in on a duty when another teacher was called away, or something to do with the school community that's actually really positive, and recognising the teachers for their work and for their hard work in kind of creative ways. So I just want to get you to think about, and I'm going to release a poll now about how inclusive is your behaviour policy. So I'd just like you to reflect. I'm going to launch that now. Is it very inclusive? Is it somewhat inclusive? Is it not at all inclusive, and you're thinking about what else you can put in place, or are you not sure? So thank you. Lots of results coming in now. That's great. We're getting up to about the 70% mark, so a few more seconds. Okay, and thank you very much. So I'll just share those results with you, and you can see, and actually half of, as you can see there, half are very inclusive, which is excellent, and 17% are somewhat inclusive. So, but there's quite a lot, a third who are not sure, which is absolutely fine, and maybe that's something then that you could go back to your governing board and be thinking about your behaviour policy, and actually be asking that question. You know, you could take that question to be on the agenda for the next governor meeting, and be thinking, is your behaviour policy inclusive? Great. So carrying on to our next topic and focusing on attendance. So why is this important? Well, Governors must monitor attendance, and we must have strategies in place to improve attendance. And obviously, for reasons that we know, students need to be in school, they need to be learning, and we really want all our pupils to want to come to school and to learn in school. So what are the challenges? Well, some pupils who have sort of an average attendance, so they don't have terrible attendance, but it's not at the the top end. They can often slip through the net, and they don't get that intervention that maybe those pupils who are really struggling with attendance get. And often it can be a slippery slope. So they start not attending, and then this creeps up, and suddenly school becomes more of an issue. Going to school, actually getting through the door. So what strategies can we put in place in order to help with this? I'm just going to actually start with the second bullet point, which is that getting pupils to understand their own attendance and how they fit in, how they slot in with the rest of the school can be really important. So putting individual students on an attendance plan is a really powerful tool. And I've seen this work really nicely where they had a specific kind of attendance club, although it wasn't called that, where they were shown their attendance in line with everybody else, kind of anonymously, and each week there was more of an incentive, or there was a discussion about it, and the kind of competitiveness or healthy competition in them sort of thought, oh, I want to be nearer the top, and so their attendance actually it really improved. So going back to the first point is, as well as the individual actually understands, making it a collective effort. So form tutors know and communicate with the class that it's a class effort, it's a form effort, that as a class we need to have 98% or 95% attendance, and within the year group there could be a reward for the form who has the highest attendance, and that means that it's not just on that individual, but the rest of the class are saying, come on, you need to come in more, because we want you here, and that improves attendance. Also, for those pupils who are struggling with attendance, first of all, on the fourth point, is that we do need to understand as governors why they're not attending and what are the reasons for the poor attendance, but also that they have these safe spaces within school, whether that is a form tutor's room, or the nurse's room, or the head of year's room, where they can go in order to, if they're not feeling as safe, or that they can go and have kind of a 10 minutes of relaxation, or and somebody to talk to. And then finally on this is actually engaging with parents, and this can be a challenge in terms of attendance, but really talking to parents, explaining how important communicating with the school is on attendance, but also making sure that their pupils arrive on time, and because attendance is one of those things that schools look for. So as universities or colleges might look at attendance, and so it's not just affecting the pupil within school, but it might be affecting them later on in life, and if they can be really punctual and on time and reliable, then it makes for, in terms of teachers writing reports on them, and giving references, that it's going to improve. So there is this other incentive really for parents and for pupils. And now looking at pupil achievement, and so it links in with the rewards that we were talking about, but why is this important? Well, obviously, we want all pupils, and this is why it directly links with inclusion, because we want all pupils to feel that they are achieving. It hugely helps with confidence, it raises their aspirations, and that directly links to improving their academic outcomes. A pupil who's not motivated, who doesn't feel like that they're working towards a goal, will not be motivated to come to school, will not be motivated to do well. And so it's really, really important that all our pupils are feeling as if they're achieving in school. But what we find is that often the same pupils are rewarded for perhaps they are the most academic, and so they're constantly being rewarded, and that same group are reaping those benefits. And so it's really important how we can include all pupils that maybe who aren't academic. So what can we do about this? So I've already mentioned Star of the Week, and I'll link that back into the case study at the end. But giving pupils roles and responsibilities within the classroom and the wider school is a way of, so it can be something as simple as being on the register, monitoring the register and taking that, or it could be, as I mentioned before, about a mentoring role, but it can also be deputy heads of year, it can be head boy, head girl, it can be a buddying system with younger years. So really giving those responsibilities. Also, I've heard of a quite funny new race called the slowest bike race, which was done, which is actually quite hard to cycle so slowly, but it does mean that it's not just the super speedy, the really sporty, but actually those the slowest bike race winner, and coming up with creative ways, especially for pupils with disabilities. How can your school really get them involved in sport and physical activity if they can, and also to celebrate that. And then looking at all the other ways of celebrating achievements, so through music, art, sport, drama, and charity events, but not just necessarily the people who are the main part, but looking at what's going on behind the scenes, who's in charge of lighting, who's on costumes, who's on, creating these roles which are really exciting, but also have that they're part of these wider kind of extracurricular activities, and that we can celebrate. And then I've mentioned praising effort there. So one case study that I heard was from a school based in London, and the teachers nominated the best pupils in terms of different characteristics. So not just academic, but also linked to these 21st century skills. So honesty, courage, curiosity, collaboration, and actually pupils were given, so they were given a lion, if a picture of a lion or a sticker of a lion if they had courage, or a magnifying glass if they had they showed curiosity. And that way, these are really some of the skills that we're going to need for our pupils to progress in the 21st century. So, and those pupils were given a shout out in assembly. And this brings us on to my last topic, which is looking at language. So why is this important? And language is everywhere. It's obviously how we communicate, but it's in everything. It's the written language. So what's on our walls of the schools, and how are we communicating with our parents and staff. But for governors, it's really important that there are these opportunities for pupils, staff and parent voices to be heard, and there must be ways in which, if there is a problem or if there's something great to talk about, that people have ways in which they can communicate with governors, and vice versa. So, and then similarly with governors' meetings, they must represent the whole governing body, and that we need to hear from all the people that make up our governing body. And what are some of the challenges? Well, often we find that the same people are speaking in meetings, the same, the loudest voices are heard. So thinking about how we can make governors' meetings really inclusive, but then also looking into the classroom, and actually research from Trinity Western University shows that boys are 9 times more likely than girls to speak in class. Which is really shocking, and something that, when Ofsted are going around, they will be looking at who's engaging in the lessons, and they will want to know about how we're communicating with our staff and parents. But also looking at a specific issue to do with language is some research done by UK Feminista, and this showed that 66% of students in secondary school experience sexist language, and 64% of teachers hear sexist language every week in secondary schools. And actually, that's becoming a lot higher in primary schools now, really shockingly. And I think that was 1/3 of teachers hear sexist language every day, so on a daily basis. So it's absolutely it's everywhere in our schools, and yet 1 in 5 teachers have had training on being able to recognise and challenge and tackle sexism. And that could be the same, with lots of different, in terms of bullying, and so, for example, homophobic language or racial language. So this really identifies that there's a key problem, and governors, as governors, we do really need to get involved. So what can we do about it? In terms of our pupils, we need to be thinking about who is talking in class, and how can we bring about pupil voice. So one school, they had their year 9 student council go round to different classes, and they sat in and marked who was talking. So they did it boys and girls, and they just marked every time a boy spoke and every time a girl spoke. But this could also be done in terms of any demographic that you want to collect data on. And they did find that boys were talking more than girls, and actually girls were often rewarded more so for being quiet and for getting on with their work. And so if we're thinking about the power of language, and we're wanting to make sure that our pupils are confident speakers, and they can walk into interviews, and they can walk into meeting people, and they have that confidence, then they need to be talking, they need to be expressing their views. But also for those pupils who aren't doing that, and who maybe need other ways in which they can share their voice, an anonymous question round in schools, or and this can be done in governors' meetings as well, making sure that people are getting across their viewpoints, but maybe they don't want to tell them to the whole group. And then on my second point there about student council, and can a governor go along to the student council and listen and hear what the students are saying, or collecting that data, so that often pupils have the answers to some of the questions that we as adults are wanting to find out. And then moving on to teachers. So as I mentioned before, there is limited training, limited CPD on how to actually recognise and challenge that this offensive language that teachers are constantly hearing, and actually changing that to use it as a teaching point. So, stopping the lesson or stopping them in the corridor and saying, well, where does that term come from, or where might you have heard that, and asking questions to then twist it round as, oh, did you actually know this word came from, and or what does that actually mean, and what effect might that have on people. But teachers need to be empowered to do that, and as governors, we need to be looking at our a CPD and talking to our senior leaders about what training there is in terms of stopping and really challenging this offensive language. And then looking at our the training on teachers' own language. So are they using gendered language, or are they using inclusive language? So for example, the term man up, or the term asking, oh, I need 2 strong boys to carry these tables, or these are some maybe more primary school examples, but how can we then switch our language to be really inclusive, and making teachers kind of aware of that. And then finally, are looking at how we can really know about what staff are feeling, and what they want to improve at, or want the school to improve at. Staff surveys, but often a challenge is that they can be quite long for staff to fill in, and then the time in which it takes to then analyse that data and get it back out and get those amendments made, can often feel for staff that nothing's really happening, or they aren't really seeing the result, and it's just another survey that they have to fill in. So how can we, because staff surveys are really important, and we need to make sure that we're hearing from our staff. So making it really short, maybe tackling one issue at a time, and sending that out, and then finding ways to directly feedback that to their line managers, as quick a turnaround as possible. And this is definitely to do in conjunction with the head teacher or the senior leadership team. So just on my second point, about the gendered language, there was a really good documentary by the BBC on called No More Boys and Girls, and I just want to play you a short clip from that, a strategy that and hopefully this will work, a strategy that a teacher used to try and help to reduce some of the gendered language that he was using in the classroom. Okay, so as you can see, the pupils are very excited there about painting. But this, and you can go back and watch the whole episode, but it just really shows how often and I guess intrinsic or natural it is maybe for us to, so we need to change our language and be really aware of our language. And then finally looking at how, specifically to do with language, how can we make language inclusive for parents? So looking at parent governors to start with, often in education we love acronyms. There's acronyms for everything, and I'm very guilty of it myself, but that can be quite overwhelming for parent governors and for new governors. So creating resources, there's lots out there. I've just added one below for you, and just making sure that if there is an acronym used in governors meetings, that they're explained so that it's inclusive. But also looking, if there are parents from different communities, not necessarily on the governing board, that don't speak English, but if the governors are going and meeting parents, that there is this a translator present that would help with that language barrier. And then finally looking at, for parents, what are your complaint procedures, and are they really clear? So do the parents know sort of where they can go if they do have a problem, and how can you keep the lines of communication open between parent and governors? And then looking finally at governors, so maybe more of a role for the chair of governors, looking at who is talking during governor meetings, but in order to make sure everyone's voices are heard and that everyone feels confident and wants to share, then asking targeted questions. So asking one particular governor to share back on something, giving them an advance warning, or asking them within the meeting, but also using pairs, so to discuss a topic at first, which can give people the confidence to then share their ideas if they've already aired them out. Sorry, just a point on parents. Just going back to parents, it's important for governors to keep those relationships open with parents, especially on things such as the new relationships in sex education. So are there opportunities for parents to give their feedback on things like this? And there is more information on that on the DFE website. So now for the second poll, I just want you to have a look at this question. So to what extent do you agree that our governing body has measures in place, to ensure pupil, staff, parent and governor voices are heard? So I'll launch that now. Do you strongly agree that you have measures in place? Partly agree? Do you disagree, or are you not sure? And that's great. We're getting nearly up to 80% of the vote. So just wait for the last few to come in. Okay, that's great. So I'll share those results with you, and as you can see, that the majority are in strongly agree or partly agree, and so that's excellent. There are some governors who who disagree and who are unsure, and I guess for those who partly agree, what other measures could you put in place? For example, if you're quite strong in terms of hearing staff voices, how could you improve in terms of hearing pupil voices or governor voices, for example? Great. So that really brings us to the end of these the 2 webinars that I've ran, and what I would like you to do is to again think back to the strategies that I've given over the last 2 webinars, or just this one, and try and think about one, again, short-term goal and one long-term goal that you could implement. So looking at short-term goals, an example would just be to hand out the acronym sheet to parent governors, or it could be having an attendance incentive group. So putting that idea forward to your senior leader team. And then long-term goals could be more actually analysing teacher training and CPD on inclusion, or looking at inclusive language, and then or reviewing your behaviour policy excuse me, through the lens of inclusion. So I'm just going to give you a few minutes now to have a look and to write down one short-term goal and one long-term goal. Okay, thank you for that. So I've just been able to have a look at some of the questions coming in. So thank you for sending in those questions. And now is an opportunity for, I'm happy to take some questions. So please do feel free to send them in now. Just having a look at what's been gone so far. So somebody has asked about whether one of the local primary schools does the attendance reward system, and attendance has improved since they implemented it, which is great to hear. And so the question is, would it be suitable for a secondary school? And I would say definitely yes. So the example that I gave was actually from a secondary school where they were given this reward system in terms of improving attendance. And pupils from primary and secondary, they love knowing how they're doing in terms of their peers, but they also love a bit of healthy competition. And if they can see a reward at the end, big or small, they're going to go for it. So I would say yes, absolutely, it is suitable for secondary school. And then another question is about Star of the Week, and again, is that for primary age, or would it be too kind of childish for a teenager? And I would say that Star of the Week is probably used for younger pupils. So, but still year 7, 8, even to year 9, I would say, it is. But really what the Star of the Week represents is a way in which the teacher can really quickly show that the pupil has done excellent work, and then give it to them so they can take it home and show their parents. And all pupils, even teenagers, they love that. But it could just be a certificate, a certificate of hard work, or it can be a more advanced or more sophisticated version of the Star of the Week. So I would just say to tailor it, but actually keep the same reasons behind giving it are the same whether you're a teenager or a younger child. I'm loving to see lots of short-term goals and long-term goals coming in. So a question here is about increasing parental engagement. So they do workshops, they do community cafes, family fun, but still the uptake is low. And it is really challenging to increase parental engagement. What I would say is, and it's slightly differs depending on whether it's primary or secondary, because obviously primary, there is that at the front gates, that relationship that can be built, and more of a conversation in terms of a quick conversation that can happen about how. I think one of the things to go back to that would be asking the parents what else they would like. So I mentioned in my last webinar, some schools have done a literacy lesson or a maths lesson to help their teachers to help their parents understand a bit more about what are they learning. But I would say trying to link it to the curriculum. Parents, they care about what their child is learning, but also they might have questions about how they can best support their child, and then it might be that the parents they want a way to communicate, for example, over email or over the phone, and it might be that it's not a good time for the parents to meet. So I'd really talk to the parents and work out what do they want, and what time is best for them. Just having a read through, and know that a few other questions are coming in. So somebody has mentioned about attendance, whether the reward system is whether it discriminates against those who have health issues. So actually looking at that, and it's a really valid question. So thank you for bringing that on. There are different ways to categorize attendance. So there are some who are authorized attendance, an authorized absence. And this would mean that there is a valid reason why that pupil is not coming in, for example, a health issue. And so in that case, yes, they are. It is important that we look at them, but they wouldn't actually be counted in the poor attendance. So it would really be those unauthorized absences where there isn't a real reason for them, not coming into school, but they're really late, for example. It would be, the reward system would be based on that. So it wouldn't put any more pressure on those pupils if they have a valid reason for not attending school. So I hope that answers your question. And then the last, we have time for maybe one more question. So just looking at a comment from about a long-term goal, so thank you for sharing this, is really to check the range of first languages spoken by the parents to ensure that the school written communications are available in a translated format. So I think that's an excellent long-term goal, really, is to make sure that those parents who, what languages are being spoken, first of all, so collecting that data, and then also how we can make sure those communications are in a wide range of languages for those people, for those parents. Great. Well, thank you very much for all of your questions and for engaging with this webinar and the webinar before. This will be up on the Governors for Schools website, but also you can contact me directly, and please do fill in the feedback form right at the end, which lets me send out any more information that you might like. But as you can see on there's my Twitter and my email address. So yeah, please feel free to get in touch, and I would really appreciate your feedback. There's just 3 questions. If you could do that for me, that would be great. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. Bye.